welcome everyone to today's lunchtime session, joining the Behaviour Change Network and Surrey County Council. We've got a record, I think this is a record for one of these lunchtime sessions, 176 comms people and others have been registered. So really great turnout. So thank you for all coming along. So just going to wait a couple more minutes before we kick off. So in the chat, if you just want to say, if you want to introduce yourself, say hello, where you're from, it'd be great for us to see where everyone's from. And also just so everyone else knows where you're all from. So if in the chat, if you want to say hello and where you're from, that's great. And we will start shortly. And it's the Teams clicking noise with lots of people joining. Hi, Susie. Welcome to today's webinar. Hi, Catherine. Hi, Barking and Dagenham. So as we're giving it another couple of minutes. Oh, I should just say, actually, I think someone's AI has joined the session as well. So if you have AIs that want to join, feel free to add in your AI meeting assistants. My autopilot may have also joined as well, but we will be recording today. And just while we're waiting for everyone to join, it's going to be the usual sort of etiquette. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Dominic Ridley-Moy, and I run the Behaviour Change Network, which is all about helping organisations to apply behavioural science and behavioural insights to their work. So I'll just kick off by saying, for those of you who've just joined, do say hello in the chat. It's going to be the usual kind of etiquette. So Q&A in the chat as we go along. Today's session will be recorded and will be available afterwards, so don't worry, you will get a recording. I think we're going to share the slides as well, and I'll also be uploading this to CIPR's CPD database. So if you collect CPD points, you'll be able to log 5 CPD points for today. So we've still got people arriving, so just going to give it another few more seconds. And hello to everyone joining, lots of people from local authorities, NHS, wide mix of people from up and down the country, Surrey Police as well, I see are joining, Derbyshire Constabulary, so a really good mix from across the country. So you're all very welcome today. So I think, how are we doing for time? So I think it's 2 minutes past. So I think we are going to kick off. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining. We're going to make a start. And today I'm really excited because we've got 3 speakers from Surrey County Council. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, and they're going to share what they're doing to equip communications teams to build trust in the organisation they work for. And as you'd expect from a Behaviour Change Network session, they're going to be talking a bit about the COM-B model, which is a really useful model to help diagnose problems and think about what they're doing with the work that they do at Surrey. So without further ado, and if you've just joined, do put questions in the chat as we go along, or the Q&As, and we'll pick those up at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Andrea, who's the Director of Communications at Surrey County Council, and she's going to kick us off for this lunchtime sessions. Andrea.
Hi, thank you, Dominic. It is off.
Yes, okay, you get a bit of feedback.
Okay, It's not Somerset. Sorry about that. We're in the same room, so we're just having done a test. We hadn't tested it this way around, obviously. So thank you everybody for joining, and thank you for sort of taking your time out of your kind of busy days to join us. I should just start by saying that obviously what we're here to talk about today, we're really excited about. It isn't the panacea, and I'm sure there are lots of colleagues out there who are doing similar things or kind of variations of this. So thank you for indulging us and having us along today. And we do hope that you get something out of our session. We are going to be as positive and as bold as we can, and we've all agreed to leave our imposter syndrome at the door and collect it on the way out, because we're just hoping that colleagues find what we have to say today useful. So my name is Andrea Newman. I'm the Strategic Director of Communications and Engagement at Surrey County Council. I also sit on the corporate leadership team, and I'm joined by Catherine Shipton and Judy Holden in my team. Catherine joined us in January from Ipsos Mori, the global pollster, and Judy, like me, has a government communications service background and has been with the council for a few years. So I wanted to take sort of 5 minutes just to set the scene, just to sort of describe this new and exciting area for work with us in Surrey. And I should just say I'm kind of reading a bit from notes, because in that true comms sense, I'm really bad at going off on a tangent and I'm not very disciplined. So I'm trying to kind of do a little bit of both. So look at the camera and kind of read some notes. So this is a really new and exciting approach for us here in Surrey that we're taking to improve public perception, manage expectations and build public confidence. In a few minutes, my colleagues Catherine and Judy will talk you through this in more detail in terms of the work we've been doing. But we're really excited to be here to tell you more about our new resident intelligence unit and how we're planning to better engage with residents and build stronger relationships with our communities. So kind of where this all started really, I guess, was a couple of years ago, as we were coming out of the worst of the pandemic. Instead of breathing a sigh of relief, like many of you, my team were faced with a huge increase in pace and volume of work, often driven by really knotty and hyperlocal issues. We were continuously having to deal with what we kind of often refer to as mini fires, where we were often being pushed into a reactive space by really loud local voices. And in some instances, these mini fires became firing infernos and completely distorting kind of where our resources and our time and focus should be. And alongside this, we experienced a series of failed consultations where I felt that we'd really misjudged the public mood and had mismanaged expectations and probably eroded trust. It wasn't a disaster, but I really felt that something had to change. I knew that we had to move forward into a space where we could better understand our residents. So we hold lots of different sets of data and insights about our residents and what they think on certain topics, but it was really disparate and it wasn't being brought together and reported effectively across the council. We also wanted to prevent the small issues from escalating. So we knew we had to get a grip sooner and get ahead of those issues. So in terms of sort of complaints and misinformation that was spreading across social media, we didn't have the resource though to monitor and identify those issues, and we couldn't prevent them from escalating. So we needed to kind of address that. And give our decision makers more perspective. We're really fortunate in Surrey that we've built really good relationships with our cabinet and in particular our leader. But the ease to which members and senior leaders are reached directly on social media through emails on the doorstep leads to certain voices becoming really distorted as the view of all residents without a representative view being given. And perhaps actually most importantly, the silent majority were being ignored. So we also wanted to better engage strategically with our residents. So there are hundreds of people. So we have 1.2 million residents in Surrey, but there are hundreds of people across the different services and directorates that are engaging currently with our residents in various different ways. And so even though my role has engagement in it, actually, ironically, there were lots of sort of elements of engagement that were happening sort of outside of my jurisdiction. So there was no overall strategy around this engagement, no oversight, no forward plan, no agreed professional framework for engagement. In other words, no consistent messaging and lots of duplication and confusion for residents. We also felt that we wanted to help our services and our policymakers better meet customer expectations by providing those policymakers with better insights. So the vision of what we are doing at Surrey is to put the residents' voices at the centre of everything we do. Our vision goes beyond just using insight for effective comms and customer service, but also ensuring it's used for better service delivery and service design. So I set about drafting the business case for the new resident intelligence unit and felt reassured that there was a huge amount of value in bringing all of this work together in one place. In all honesty, I couldn't believe that we hadn't done it before. And this idea has been percolating for about a year. So to just give you a sense, this wasn't something that we've achieved overnight. It's been trying to sort of move a very big vessel internally to kind of bring them round to our way of thinking. So essentially using research data and sentiment analysis, and what that tells us, we will now focus our communications activities and our strategy around those areas that we feel the residents feel most dissatisfied with, or conversely most satisfied with. So striving for a mix of campaigns and content where we can capitalise and build on that satisfaction and improve trust and confidence in the areas where we're most competent, and in the areas where residents are more dissatisfied, we will be honest in sharing our intent and how we're striving to do better with a view to building confidence. So this is going to mean quite a big step change for us in terms of how we work, and we will need much closer collaboration with policy and delivery teams, as well as working in an integrated way with our customer transformation colleagues. Our plan is also to create a dedicated framework for organisational listening with a view to integrating multiple sources of feedback. So beyond just our mainstream channels, it will include correspondence, complaints, call centre data, social media comments. So a really whole team approach. So in conclusion, in terms of that scene setting, I'd say that we're positioning ourselves at the heart of the organisation, and we're really trying to see ourselves as part of the solution to building that trust. There's a real opportunity for us as communications professionals to help steer our organisations through some really challenging times. I won't mention yesterday, the election, and we need to strategically plan and put the right tools in place in order to deliver this. So in large part, to do this, we are pulling in on existing resources from within the council in order to refocus how we do things and get them to work better for us in that central way. That said, I do appreciate that we are working in challenging financial times. So we have been really mindful of that throughout the presentation, and where we are suggesting further resources to you, we have been really cognizant of those financial challenges and signposting you to resources that are available. So we really hope that you learn something today, either something new, or hopefully it might reinforce something that you're already planning within your own communications teams. I'm going to hand over to Catherine now. As I said earlier, Catherine joined us from Ipsos Mori. So this is not analytics and data, is not my area of expertise. So I was really keen that we made sure that we got the really technical experts in. So I'm absolutely over the moon that Catherine's joined us from Ipsos Mori. She's an incredible talent, and she's going to be spearheading this work for us. So over to you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And just push the slide on before I. Okay, brilliant. So as Andrea said, I am the head of the new resident intelligence unit, and I'm absolutely delighted to join her and the team, and really a place that is just so focused on the experiences of residents and ensuring that we are listening to them. It's absolutely music to my ears, and everything that I was really focused on helping clients with when I was at Ipsos. When I was there, I was really specifically looking at customer experience, insight, thought leadership generation, and trends and foresights, all of which hopefully comes through here and really is what I've brought to the council. It's been about 6 months of the unit being up and running, and I thought I would just take a few minutes to look at some of the specifics about what we're doing as a unit before actually going back to the question I know we should be answering about trust and public confidence. As you can see on this slide, and I've used this quite a bit over the last few months, we're really set up as a central function for resident insight, with the primary goal of ensuring, as Andrea said, that residents' opinions are front and centre in decision making and ultimately all of the policy which we're working on. Our key tools and work streams are there in those green boxes at the top, and they are behaviour change, research and consultations and engagement. What we're really trying to do is make sure that the unit is the first point of call for resident engagement for all teams across the council, and really trying to make sure that before we undertake any new engagement, we've got a comprehensive understanding of what we already know, which actually is a huge amount. We've got a lot of existing knowledge, a huge amount of context and insight already, so let's make sure that we're using it. And then it's really about making sure that we're getting the insight that we have as a central team into the hands of the teams that can actually do something about it at a service delivery level. And really that is all going to happen through this system-wide approach that we want to take to design, implementation and activation ultimately of the insights which we have. A few things that I've listed out here in terms of specifics about what we as a team are doing, producing insight reports, of course, pulling on polling data, social media and media analysis, and you'll see some of that in the upcoming slides, as well as really using a vehicle which we already had in place, our resident satisfaction survey, using that more and more to make sure that we are focused on the national benchmark data as well as our own about what's going on in Surrey. And just to do a quick shout out as well, that one of our real big priority focuses at the moment is to focus on coordinating this engagement. And what I'm hoping to do is get in place a digital tracking tool to really make that possible for everybody to use and make sure that we're sort of coordinating a bit better. But really, just to summarise, the value that I want to bring is, there are a few, and really it's about uplifting these insight opportunities through knowledge sharing, improving our valuation of what we're doing so that we do more of what we're doing well. Hopefully, obviously, create some efficiencies within that, as well as working in our transformation space, and particularly there we've got a big focus on customer at the moment, and we are working very closely to make sure that our insight is actually helping to form some of that work. As well as on the comms side, as Andrea mentioned, really trying to prove some early insights into emerging issues, gaps and opportunities. And ultimately, this is all about creating a more coherent experience for residents themselves and making sure that they are at the centre of everything that we do. Anyway, I promise you that I'm going to go back to the question which we're actually trying to cover today. So one of the really big challenges, as Andrea set up at the beginning, was around that we really wanted to get our teeth into, was really around trying to build public confidence and actually taking a bit of a look at the importance of trust and what are some really practical interventions, small wins for sure, that we can actually use as a team. So what I want to do is talk you through a bit of the background about trust, and excuse my many references to Ipsos because that is where I've come from. Lots that really is about landscaping, and then really looking at this concept of trust in crisis. It's something that we're seeing a lot in the media, and spoiler, it's just actually not true. But what is true is that trust is even more important than it has ever been. And it's completely key for the work that we're doing in terms of focusing on building relationships with our residents. So what is actually driving that and how can we do it? And then I will stop talking and I'll hand over to my colleague Judy, who is leading on the behaviour change side within RIU. And she will talk us through some of the applied COM-B model, which we've used for this question, and ultimately show us some practical applications and hopefully some opportunities that you'll find interesting for how you could take some of that away. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end for sure. So moving through to that first piece, really about trust and what do we mean by trust. So when we've been talking about trust, we are understanding it as in the context of organisations or large institutions like ourselves and many of you on the call. So we're focusing on an organisation's level of trustworthiness rather than increasing individuals' trust in us, if that makes sense. So in its simplest form, trust can be broken down simply to A, trusts B to deliver X. A are our residents, B is us, and X are all of the public services which we are trusted to deliver. And this really is quite a simple definition which we've used, but It can also have other dimensions added to it, and it really is important because we are trusted to deliver these services without residents continually having to check that we're doing what we said we'll do. And as soon as that isn't the case, that trustworthiness will go down. So we can increase our trustworthiness over time by meeting the public's expectations and giving customers a say in what matters, while being open and transparent about some of these limitations. And that's really what we're focused on. As you can see on the right, this is a graph that I just thought was amazing, and shows really why trustworthiness for us as a council really matters. So this was polling from Ipsos for the Local Government Information Unit, who asked respondents to choose from the list who has the biggest impact on the quality of their life in their area. And you can see that over half said that ultimately it was the local council. So this is really evidence that residents understand that what we're doing really does matter. But the thing is, for councils like us to deliver services effectively, in making sure this trust is in place is just a prerequisite. You know, there are many different examples of this, but, you know, in time of need or crisis, and I mean, we had a very big crisis very recently, residents need to be able to access services, but if they don't trust us, they're not going to do that. So that's a really big one. And then obviously we're in the context of an election coming up now. We need there to be high resident engagement in consultations and elections and all democratic processes. And we can only deliver what we promise to do effectively if our residents are engaged and are telling us what they want, so that we can actually deliver on that and make sure that we are listening to them. From obviously a comms point of view, I think the most pressing thing here is that a really strong relationship built on trust means that residents will see us as a trusted voice to correct misinformation and know that we are a source that they can actually go to in the first place. We can better mitigate and manage reputational risk. And we really need to be able to build that trustworthiness to ensure clear communication, and that residents know that ultimately we're trying to do our best. Looking at current figures on public trust, I have to say, you know, it doesn't look particularly great. So you can see here on this slide that some ONS data from last year shows that 57% of the UK public said that they have no or little trust in government. Local government does fare slightly better, 46%, but is still not great. And these trends are absolutely mirrored in the most recent LGA data, and shows really similar numbers for local government there. What's interesting, and this is some other Ipsos work, smaller councils tend to be more trusted than larger ones. So it's not such great news for county councils the size that Surrey is. But given the high numbers of the public that don't trust us, and certainly a recent fixation on public trust within the media, it is really easy to think that, okay, there's a crisis here. But, and this is why I wanted to put this slide up, if you look at trust over time, it actually shows quite a different picture. Since 2012, so that's amazingly 12 years, trust has always hovered around the high 50% bar. Obviously, there's been a couple of exceptions, as you can see there, a high of 71% during the pandemic, which probably isn't surprising. But this really doesn't indicate that we're in a trust crisis, and trust levels have hovered around this point. There is more data to back this up as well. Ipsos does a veracity index, which tracks trust in professionals, and this is a trend that's been going since 1983. And trust in professions is broadly stable over the last 3 decades, more generally, but also for politicians and civil servants. So one could actually argue that local government managers have not done badly considering the cuts in funding, and actually they've kept public satisfaction fairly high. I wouldn't necessarily say that any of this data is indicating that there's a crisis of trust, at least within local government. But it is worth saying that while I've sort of simplified trust quite a bit, it is really hard to measure. So as I said earlier on, being trusted as an individual is very different to building trustworthiness as an organisation. And pinning down the facets of what this actually is and measuring it is a different question altogether. On the screen, I've got some, indications of where different sources are going in terms of what they think trust really is. We've got a couple of examples from Deloitte, OECD, and of course Ipsos. And you may want to use some of these as drivers within your own communication strategies, weaving them into narratives, as you're trying to communicate with residents. What we've decided to do is measure trust in line with the LGA. The question that the LGA recommends using that we like is simply, how much do you trust your local council? We really see a benefit of having a national benchmark for it. But alongside considering and being aware of these different measures which are on screen. And what we really want to do is make sure that we're taking a very resident, customer-centric view when it comes to trust and drilling down into what resident perception is of us. Do they think we're reliable? Do they think that we do what we say we'll do? Are we open and honest? And making sure that we've got a good handle on that. So hopefully I've demonstrated how we are looking at trust, and ultimately trustworthiness does seem to be more important than ever in the political and economic landscape that we're operating in. Reputation and trust are just coming up time and time again in relation to the delivery of public services, and this isn't a surprise. And I have to say, so we read the OECD's scan of the government communication services in relation to strengthening public trust, and we were just all like nodding dogs reading through it. And I just wanted to summarise some of the themes that were coming out from that, because I think they were really, really interesting. So firstly, the media are often reporting high levels of political polarisation, and this is exacerbating the divisions that we see socially and culturally. Some King's College research that Ipsos did from 2021 reports that 51% of the UK public think that the UK is currently the most divided it has ever been in their lifetime. And when you actually break the audience down, into this supposed culture war, you've got a quarter in each extreme camp of traditionalists and progressives, but that leaves 50% in the middle, split between moderates and disengaged. So what we're doing is we're having to work in a time with a large proportion who are actually in that middle and disengaged, but we're listening to two really extreme positions, and this is what is generating public and political attention. So we need to go back to trustworthiness. The OECD are also reporting that audiences, and I mean, this is no surprise to any of us, that audiences are time poor and that media outlets are producing more provocative and clickbait style content to grab attention. I mean, a crazy stat that I saw from Ofcom, 47% of adults, their main way that they are consuming news is from social media, and this actually increases to 71% for 16 to 24-year-olds. So it's just a real good indication of how things are changing. And obviously what this means is we've got to be extremely careful with public mis and disinformation, and I think that's something that we are really putting up our priority list. Obviously, all of this as well sits amongst a backdrop of a very challenging funding environment and post-pandemic recruitment issue into the front line. And I think, I won't say any more on that, but it does make this a very fragile environment. And if we don't carefully plan this, it could create quite a significant breakdown in relationships between council and the public. There is some good news there, I promise. And this came through in the OECD findings as well. So their conclusion was that communications can strengthen the feedback loop. And ultimately, we can build public trust through this. And we don't necessarily need to see a suffer in the perception of local government for the citizens and residents that it serves. That has been an absolute whistle-stop tour on the state of trust. But hopefully it kind of sets the scene for why this is such a big focus for us at the moment and why we wanted to talk about it today. And I will now hand over to Judy to talk us through our combi analysis and some of the interventions that we've planned.
Wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm just going to take around 10 minutes to talk through the next few slides, which will concentrate on how we've applied a behavioural lens.
Judy, I can't hear you.
No,
here today. I'm just going to talk through the next few slides, which will concentrate on how we've applied a behavioural lens using combi methodology to strengthen our relationship with our residents. Obviously, trust is not a behaviour, so we've focused on using combi to help us understand what the barriers are for residents in engaging with our communications. I've kept it quite high level and theory-based, mainly due to time, because once you start to drill down into the combi, you can get quite detailed. But I've also wanted to make sure that we give you some helpful takeaways which will be applicable to your own organisations. Okay, so when applying behavioural science to communications at Surrey, we follow the Cabinet Office's three-step process. As you can see here on the screen, the first step is to ensure your communications are based on insight, to get a real understanding of what drives your audience's behaviours. The second step is to find out what the capability, opportunity and motivational barriers your audience have to enact a desired behaviour. So the behaviour we are looking at today is resident engagement. The third and final step is to identify potential solutions, such as information campaigns or incentivisation to hopefully persuade them or to get them to change their behaviour. Okay, Catherine, can I have the next slide, please? So step one is around understanding why people behave the way they do. So our communications are planned around insight, mainly from our quarterly neighbourhood survey, as Catherine just mentioned, and we also run separate polls and have paid access to national YouGov polling where we can drill down to a specific Surrey audience. However, we also use lots of free or low-cost resources that I wanted to share with you today. I'm sure many of you are already using these, but it's just helpful sometimes to just have them listed out. So there are lots of free national resources, and whether it's published ongoing omnibus surveys or published research, we found, you know, a lot of the issues that we're facing in Surrey are issues across the country, and you don't always need a localised picture to start building your insight. Starting at a national level can help to draw out some hypotheses around behaviours that we can then test at a local level. And if we do need to do some research, we can focus the budget on that. So I would definitely say start at the Office of National Statistics and research agencies, just as Ipsos, giving Catherine one more shout out there, and YouGov are such a good place to start. Once you've done your sort of national picture and drilled down, you can start looking at local data. So that this is the data your organisation or your partners hold. This could be census information, your service usage, the demographics of people using your services, published JSNA data, and then past consultations or surveys. Looking back at those can help determine for your response rates what your residents are interested in and what their hot topics are. I've listed two audience segmentation tools here, so Acorn and Mosaic. There's loads more, but I just wanted to talk about Acorn because I personally love their free Tableau tool. So it's up on Tableau, it's completely free, and for those of you that haven't come across Acorn before, it provides consumer classifications based on geographic, social, population and consumer behaviours. And once you're on the tool, you can drill right down into individual postcodes across the UK, and you can find out about the different types of audience living in the neighbourhoods. The amount of detail is, I think, really good for a free tool. So you can find out about consumer choices, lifestyles, and most importantly, their channel preferences as well. So yeah, we share the link at the end of this presentation, so do make sure you have a look at that. So moving on to primary research, obviously if you don't have budget, you can run free focus groups or surveys, but if you do, it's always good to run some commissioned research. But if you don't have access to a researcher, you can take standardised research questions, as Catherine said, that we've done for Trust from the LGA resident survey. you can also use ONS standardised questions as well. Regarding focus groups, if there's no one in your organisation to advise you, I've done a bit of digging around before this presentation, and I found a very good guide on citizens advice, and we've linked to it at the end of the presentation as well, on how to run community focus groups. Right, so next slide, please, Catherine. Right, so now we're going to get into the COM-B model and look at our capability barriers. So a capability barrier is when our audience doesn't have the right awareness, knowledge and skills to engage with us. So some capabilities around engagement are, and I have kept this top level, a lack of understanding on council services or support. So not understanding what we are there for and why a relationship with us is beneficial. And what we face at the county council is a lack of knowledge of what we do versus our district and borough councils. It can be very confusing on what each organisation does, and our audience are not going to engage with us if they don't understand what we do. And there may be a lack of skills or understanding due to confusing language, or simply just really confusing and off-putting customer journeys or systems to get to services. So some interventions to overcome these barriers include informative awareness campaigns, and going back to what Catherine and Andrew said, so basing these on your competence, areas where you know your customer satisfaction is high or where satisfaction is a little bit lower, focusing on your intent. So when planning these, though, it's important to sort of take into consideration an unintended consequence of this could be to drive an increase in service demand. Obviously, you can mitigate this by careful channel selection and being as truthful as possible around your service and the challenges you face. Our second intervention is raising awareness of the council's role and the role of elected members. I've put a still there from some recent communications our wonderful corporate communications team produced on what a county councillor does. We wanted to raise awareness of our local councillors and communicate a real local authenticity about them as people and their commitment to what they do. And lastly, we can use our insight and resident voices to improve the customer experience for our residents. The RIU are working closely with our customer transformation programme. We can support them by using insight and behavioural science to reduce areas of sludge in customer journeys. And sludge is basically the opposite to a behavioural nudge. It's the stuff that stops or slows down a positive behaviour, such as an overly complicated process. And I've come across some brilliant work by the New South Wales government in Australia. It's from their Behavioural Insights unit, and they run sludge audits every year. And again, I've included the link at the end of this presentation, but it's really helpful. But we do understand that not all comms teams will be able to make that impact at a strategic level due to resource. So just using insight to make small tactical improvements to residents' experiences, such as improving a web page or a service usage request form, will contribute to strengthening relationships by improving perception and building confidence in our ability to make things easier for our residents. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So now moving on to motivational barriers. Motivation looks at whether our audience wants a relationship with us. For many, I mean, let's be honest, it's just not a priority. And some of the barriers might be because there is no emotional reward or incentivization. In other words, what do they get for engaging with us? It's important to highlight here that an emotional reward can be as little as a small act of recognition, like a thank you. The second point, they lack interest in what we do and don't think we are relevant to their lives. They may also have an existing lack of trust in us, perhaps from a previous experience of not being listened to or not receiving any feedback when they've engaged previously. So interventions to overcome motivational barriers include communicating rewards and celebrating local successes. Your rewards could be emotional, for example, and I've included some examples from our corporate communications team again. So our Make It Happen campaign, we ask residents to get involved, have their say and influence what happens in their community. We of course use the campaign to feedback positive stories and celebrate different communities in Surrey. or your rewards can be monetary. And we also have the Your Fund Surrey campaign, which is more focused on incentivising our audience through funding for community projects. Both projects help motivate our audience by telling them that we want them to tell us about their local communities. And we offer a type of payback either through funding or emotional payback, which is celebrating their community with them. In the second point on intervention, so information on how councils make decisions is important for correcting misinformation, and it also shows that we are open and honest. I've put an example on the slide of a video our corporate comms team produced on how council tax is spent in Surrey. The video brings to life how the budget is being spent, keeping the messages informative, relevant, and mostly important, fun. But I also thought it's quite a good case study of showing both our competence and intent as a council. And then the next bullet, using trusted voices. So whether that's resident case studies or trusted institutions in your community. For example, I'm really excited because at the moment we're exploring working with University of Surrey on some behaviour change projects. I mean, this brings two benefits to us. Partnering with them not only gives us access to some very qualified behavioural scientists, but it also demonstrates to our residents that we're working on projects which are just not about the council telling people what to do, and University of Surrey using the trust and goodwill people have with them can help us also land some important messages. And then lastly, share regular updates and show you are listening. So this is essentially keeping that feedback loop going. Use your insights to find out what your audience is interested in and how regularly your audience want to hear from you. We need to build their confidence and challenge misconceptions by talking to them about what matters to them, and we need to keep ourselves relevant in their lives. And then the last slide, and I think those of you that know Combi would have realised that I've swapped it all around because I've left opportunity to last, because opportunity barriers are both in the social environment and physical environment, and they are notoriously tricky to overcome and cannot be fixed by communications alone. So we need to work as an organisation as a whole, to make systematic changes to overcome opportunity barriers, basically. So you'll realise when I talk through the points below that I'm slightly veering out of what's in our gift as communicators, and that we will need to tackle some of these barriers as a holistic system. But anyway, right, I'll continue. So opportunity barriers include not being present when our audience are having conversations about our services. We know that residents will go to local Facebook pages to discuss services or find information, and we're currently not there to engage with them. And at times, we need to be there to prevent issues from escalating. So going back to Andrew's point about mini fires, as Catherine pointed out, we're so time poor in the UK now, and so every engagement that we have with our residents, we need to make it count. And to have a strong relationship, we need to engage as one council, not bombard them from different services. Non-responsive channels. So if residents are finding our channels, such as our social media channels, and not are only broadcasting information, we are not giving our audience the opportunity to feel heard, and we are reducing the opportunity for them to strengthen their relationship with us. And there's no social norms to engage. People, I mean, this is around your peer groups and your families and friends. So being discouraged from engaging with us. So young people, I think if young people started sharing Surrey County Council's social media posts, it would be nothing short of a miracle. But if we create positive engagement experiences, we can hopefully reduce the risk of this through positive word of mouth. Although I completely appreciate this is a huge transformation piece that comms is only one part of. Given the above barriers, we realised we needed to move our social media strategy, so this is something that was in our gift, to a more responsive plan with resource now allocated to correct misinformation and to feedback to services where our residents may feel dissatisfied. We also be present in community pages and feedback insight from these into our comms and services. As Andrea said before, this is quite a shift for us, but we've recognised that we need to shift the reliance from our own channels or our paid for channels and increase our presence amongst more earned channels like community groups to make it easier for residents to build their relationship with us. And the last point is to work across the system. We need to engage as one council. Engagement with our residents needs to meet our resident needs and not ours. And we need to engage with consistent messaging. And I'll hand you back to Catherine to conclude. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Judy. So really, to recap what we've covered today, I wanted to leave you with 5 key takeaways. Obviously, it's always 5 for how to equip your team to build public trust. So firstly, if you haven't already, start to measure trust. So as we did, I would recommend benchmarking against national averages, and that really helps to understand what is contributing at an overall level, as well as understanding where you sit within that national context. Secondly, identify and communicate on what these drivers of trust are, thinking about perception, confidence, and managing expectations. Thirdly, focus on local issues that matter to residents the most and not what your organisation wants to talk about necessarily. They might be the same, they might not be. But what we've found is that the more local, the more trusted. So making sure that you're working with relevant partners and really showcasing real, genuine stories is always the best way to go. Champion your audience voices internally. So use your insight to push for service change and feedback to your audience that you've done that. As you know, Judy alluded to, even the most incredible communications in the world will not build trust if service delivery isn't up to scratch or the services do not meet expectation or demand. So it is just understanding that we are one part of that holistic picture. And then finally, you might not have the dedicated resource for a resident intelligence unit, which obviously we are so lucky to have been able to set up, but you can prioritise organisation-wide, non-siloed, unified ways of working that are resident-centric and really putting that customer at the front of things. I hope that this has been a useful session. We, as Judy alluded to, have linked a load of resources in the appendix that we hope that you might dig into for some further reading and of interest. That's in this deck, which we'll share around. Our contact details are also there. I'm really happy to follow up with anyone if they'd like to chat. But for now, I will leave it there. And I think we'll hand over to Dominic to do the Q&A. I'll stop sharing my slides now.
Thank you. That was really, really fascinating. I've got so many questions myself, but I'm going to hold fire because so many avenues and interesting things, and really interesting to hear in particular what you're going to be doing with the University of Surrey and how that's going to feed into your work. So that could be a future session another day, but that's for another time. So in the meantime, got really good question from Deborah. So her question was kind of, I suppose, how public knowledge around districts and counties and whether people understand them or don't understand what a district versus a county does that feed into trust? Does that matter? And also things like outsourced services. So obviously a lot of councils do and don't have outsourced services, from bin collections to parks to leisure centres. Again, whether that makes a difference or not, and how that feeds into trust. Who wants to? Do you want to take that one, Catherine?
There, certainly. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the big thing that we're trying to do as an RAU is really make sure that the resident as the customer is central to everything that we're doing. And ultimately, if we are putting ourselves in the shoes of a resident, they don't really care who is delivering what. And that's what we need to get to. And if that means improving our partnerships with those that deliver the services, if it means partnering further with district and boroughs, which we're always, the intention absolutely is that we're always there. That's what we need to do. I mean, obviously totally admitting the realities of things too, but I think that is where we need to get to, and just keep challenging ourselves as an organisation to make sure that that resident is what we're always prioritising, rather than our own systems and structures, which is just, it's so easy to get in the way, and it often does. But are we trying to make sure that we're always thinking about who is at the very end?
Andrea and Judy, did you want to come in at all?
The only The only thing I would just add to that, sorry, we're clearly not tech experts, are we?
It's all good.
That's why we don't work in IT. The only thing I would just add to that is that's kind of what we did through COVID. We are really, really lucky in Surrey. We have a fantastic network of district and borough comms colleagues, police colleagues, health colleagues, and it genuinely is a really good partnership. So we do work really closely. I think we could do more, and I think what Catherine just said is utterly spot on. But I think where it was demonstrated best was through COVID. We had one voice, all residents kind of just got one message, we all work completely together. And I think, a lot of colleagues on this call will recognise that. So I think it's trying to find the spirit and the essence of how we did that through COVID, but kind of in more sort of peacetime, I think.
I'm just quickly going to bring in another question, because that relates to what you've just said, that thing about someone saying that that kind of personal versus individual trust versus organisational trust. It's a bit of a weird thing, that kind of, is it about the individuals or is it about the organisation? And I think you've just answered that to an extent on the COVID question, which is why I was going to say, what have we learned from COVID about organisational versus individual trust? So I don't know if you want to pick up on that as well, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, it does. And I just saw the comment in the chat there about the personal individual. And I do agree. I mean, we're not trying to create a division between personal trust and organisational trustworthiness unnecessarily. I think it's more just about what our focus is, and that is about reputation. Ultimately, what we do as an organisation as a whole is what we're trying to impact here. We actually fully appreciate and know the strength of the individual relationships on the front line are actually incredibly strong in most cases, and that isn't what we're focused on here. What we're trying to say is we want to make sure that the messaging that we are generating both ways, so what we're sending out, but also how we are trying to close the loop with our residents and customers, is built on how they feel more generally about the organisation, and that is our trustworthiness. I think that's the difference and what I'm trying to pull apart here. But it isn't at all to say that we're not, of course, trying to build individual trust with those that we work with as well.
That's really useful, thank you. Judy, do you want to pick up on any of the points so far?
No, it's just on that personal and organisational trust. I think the point is that instead of focusing on building trust within our residents, we need to look in at ourselves, and it's about translating or communicating why we're trustworthy. So just trying to, think of it in that way rather than building trust in our residents. So we need to tell our residents to trust us. It's about what can we tell them that they're interested in us as an organisation. So it's organisational trustworthiness.
And one thing I just want to pick up on is that one of the questions, and something I was thinking about, is that, I mean, obviously, particularly in local authorities, there's always a bit of an issue, I suppose, between how you use politicians and how you use officials. And sometimes there's a difference between how much politicians versus officials are trusted. So I'm going to be quite diplomatic here. And I think sometimes I did a workshop not that long ago where it was interesting how I was asked by a director of public health, do you think I should do videos? Because the question was very much around, as a council official, am I trusted, or should we defer to GPs or local voices in the community? So quite an interesting question about who you use and who you put up and how you, I suppose, and also how you then build that trust. You're nodding, Catherine, so I'll go to you initially on that one.
I mean, yeah, so the only thing I would say, and I would, do another shout out for the Ipsos Veracity Index with this, of who the most trusted professionals are, is really fascinating. And I would just go and have a look at it, because it's quite interesting. I mean, the big fall from grace when I was looking at the trends on that were that the clergy are in a disaster zone of trust crisis, I have to say, but everybody else is just pottering along. And actually, I mean, local councillors are, are way down, civil servants are quite high up. It makes sense. And actually, I suppose, why not look at that sort of thing when you're saying, how should we communicate messages? I'm not saying we should always go through a certain route, and you need to look at each as it makes sense with your individual sort of comm strategy that you're trying to do. But looking at something like that to see how our different audiences open to different vehicles is a really good point. Andrew, did you want to go next? Let me just mute.
There we go, very smooth.
We did it. I think yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, certainly in Surrey, you know, more often than not, like most people, our sort of cabinet members are our sort of go-to, or our leader on the whole. Throughout COVID, we consistently used the Director of Public Health because we felt that she was the most technical expert and she was the right person. But again, just to sort of back up what Catherine's saying, we've also had incidences, not just in COVID, but since then. We had quite a high-profile alleged murder last year, and obviously that's Surrey Police's kind of area of expertise, and they're leading on that. But actually, we did do quite a lot of work with our local imam, whom we struck up quite a good relationship with during the pandemic, because it impacted that local community, that local area. So we do have those really kind of great, that sort of good contacts book, if you like, and we will go to the person that we think the community is most likely to trust in that scenario. So we don't have a sort of hard and fast, right, this is the protocol, we'll only ever go to these people. And actually, we're very lucky that our leader will defer to whom we think is the best person in that situation.
Can I just add on that? I think it's either Ipsos or another research study I've read on this, but a local person or a normal person on the street is super trusted, rather over than professionals. But I know that obviously, as we know from COVID, medical professionals are one of the highest trusted as well.
I'm just going to, Judy, I'm going to keep with you just about, it was one of the questions that I thought was interesting around how we empower residents to have their say more. And I thought that was quite a neat segue. So not to put words into your mouth, but it felt like you were doing things where you were actually saying to residents, what would you like to be involved in, but giving them a kind of a meaningful choice, rather than sometimes I think there's a danger of not giving people meaningful choice. So it'd be good just to say a bit more about how that worked, how useful it was, and if that's the kind of road you went down, as it were.
I would love to take credit for the campaign, but it's not mine. So I don't know, Andrew, if you know much about the Make It Happen campaign, but we've been running it for 2 years. It was for our community's portfolio at the time, and there were lots of separate campaigns or events or things happening in the communities, and we wanted to pull it all together under one umbrella brand, and it's positive, fun, informative, imaginative, and I think it has been really successful. It has been really successful. I've got some evaluation things I can send on to the person who's asked about it, if that's helpful. Sorry, what was the question? Is it in the chat?
Yeah, it was just really about kind of, I suppose, meaningful engagement so that you empower residents to have more of a say, really, and how you kind of educate them around that kind of thing. So I think that answers that. I'm just going to come on to another question now, because I'm just conscious of time where we've got a few more questions to get through. So obviously, I think it's fairly early days in the unit, but have you seen any increase in levels of trust at all, or is that something that's yet to come as the work becomes more embedded?
Yeah, the second, Dominic, definitely. So, I mean, we've started to track trust. We don't necessarily have a lead on where that's going, but what we're trying to do is make sure that everything that we are tracking now is actually being fed into our business plans to make sure that we are able to include the evaluation and impact on these bigger metrics overall. Ultimately, if we're not going to use them, then we shouldn't be tracking them. So we need to really challenge ourselves to make sure that we understand what the drivers of these are and actually make change on the back of it. And I alluded to, you know, the work that we're doing to support the customer transformation work. This is a really big part of that, and making sure that we're redesigning and making sure that our reporting is as optimal as it possibly can be, and we're not just creating reports for report's sake, and making sure that that is really leading into decision making overall. And I think that's one of the big things that I really want us to be able to focus on, because otherwise we don't really have a leg to stand on for running these research programs in the first place, because it's like, yeah, it's really nice to have, but what are we actually doing with it in the end? And that's something that I'm really hoping to see some good results on, you know, a year in. So I mean, the first 6 months has flown, so I'm not going to give myself these target dates, but yeah, hopefully we will be able to show the value of what we've brought and make sure that we're tracking it for a reason.
No, I'm sure you will. We'll get you back for another webinar when you've got results as well. So I was just going to say, Andrea and Catherine, if you want to swap round mute, I was just going to come back to you with a question, Andrea. Just pick up on what we've been saying and also bring in another question, which is really, I suppose, how you demonstrate, I suppose, the value in terms of influencing big policy and strategy decisions. So obviously you've got all this insight and there's stuff you're going to do off the back of it, but how do you report back to residents that they are making a difference to those big kind of strategy decisions, so they feel that their voice is actually heard? And I suppose there's also that bit about, so it seemed to be heard as well.
Yeah, so that is actually starting to happen. So I think Catherine's being a bit modest actually, because although we haven't sort of got to the point of being able to measure so that difference in trust, I think that the sort of the low hanging fruit is particularly around consultations. And actually, what I will say to add to what Catherine said is, perversely, the trust that we've gained has been internal with our cabinet members and our corporate leadership team and our kind of leadership colleagues, because what we've been able to do is really evidence what we're doing. I mean, it's literally liberating for me, because this isn't really my world. I haven't come from a data analytics world, and I dipped my toe in the water after a sort of chance encounter with YouGov and thought, oh my God, I had no idea that's what our residents thought about that. We really only have our own view of ourselves. This is absolutely bonkers. I can't believe that we've been doing all this and we're it's been a bit misguided. So I think, but in terms of, so for example, one of the things that Judy and Catherine have been working on really quickly is a centralised framework around consultations. And that is immediately starting to build trust with our communities. We've seen things in the council in the last couple of months that we've never seen before, where we've had, you know, like the cycling fraternity, for example. We had a really big controversial active travel scheme. And again, it was almost like the kind of the genesis of this unit, because we really messed up, to use the polite version. We went out, we did something, and we absolutely got it totally wrong. And then we had to spend quite a considerable amount of time, sort of, if you like, regaining the trust of that community in that particular locality, because we knew we'd got it wrong. So through using the evidence, understanding that data in a way that was far more sophisticated than we'd ever done before, we were able to kind of get that kind of group in. We couldn't still go ahead with the proposal because it wasn't statutory in this case, but it just was proven to be not the right option. And again, we were able to evidence that, but actually being able to talk through the data and to show kind of what cycling fraternities thought about this project, what the community thought about that project, being able to explain that data. I mean, it sounds mad, but I mean, we're all comms people here, so this is a safe space. But actually, data without the story is nothing. And that was the thing that was really missing. And so what we've been able to do is really sort of, if you like, translate it, dare I say it, with our kind of leaders, and really bring them to the party on some things. And they are genuinely now starting to take a completely different approach. But actually, I think the big part, I guess the quick win around trust with residents is the honesty piece. We are now being much more candid and honest when we're going out and consulting. If it genuinely isn't a consultation, we're being quite upfront about that. So we've just recently launched our fire and rescue service consultation. They sit with us, and the way we've approached that has been completely different. So we are managing to kind of get some traction with some of the work that we're doing. I think the big headline results, yeah, will definitely come back in 6 months, because the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, won't it? But we're really excited about what we're already seeing, and what we're already able to demonstrate, and actually being able to get the trust of our kind of cabinet members and our CLT colleagues has actually been a really big shift as well in terms of this area. So that's been, you know, a success.
That, yeah, I was going to say, absolutely fascinating. We could carry on talking all afternoon. I've got lots of questions, but unfortunately we're out of time, so we are going to draw it to a close. The recording will be available. Lots of people asking for the links that you've shared, so I'm sure we'll be sharing all of those. And if there's a business case on your unit even and setting up, even if it's a redacted one that you'd be happy to share, that would be amazing. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you for coming along, to our speakers from Surrey County Council. It's been really enjoyable. Can't wait to hear how it goes. So we're definitely going to have you back for another session if you'll come back. And do remember you are able to log CPD points if you're a CIPR member once the recording's up. So thank you again for coming, and hope to see you all again soon. And thank you for such an insightful and interesting session. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.